Welcome back to the Confident Dance Teacher, where we empower educators to inspire, lead, and transform the world of dance. Today, we have Mariah-Jane Thies back with us. So if you didn't see the other interview, you're going to have to make sure you check that out. But we want to talk today a little bit more about, of course, her work at the Radiant Dance Teacher, but also dive more into like the young kids, the adolescents, and the little pre was preschool. Lost the word there for a second. Age children and what it takes for that set. So our other interview kind of talked about more like the teenagers, maybe even some of the preteens in there. Kind of depends, everybody grows at a different rate. So yeah, I wanted to dive in a little bit more into your background, Mariah-Jane, with being an accompanist. And we know you danced when you were young, then you became an accompanist when you had broken your foot. But that gave you a really neat perspective because you got to watch teachers teach, which is something I highly recommend all teachers do, is to take that step back and really like sit side by side with the teacher and just observe. Because everybody has their own teaching philosophies and techniques and methodology. And I just find it fascinating that you got that as a teenager and got to see it for so long. So tell us a little bit about what you observed.
Oh yeah. I'm just gonna harken what you just said. There's nothing better than observing teachers, which is different than taking class as a teacher. Because when you're taking class as a teacher, you're probably in your body, you're there for you. But to just observe the teaching, right? So to just observe the teaching, and most importantly, to observe the effect on those students. So
Mm.
whenever she was doing sort of the active teaching, sorry about the dog barking.
I can't hear the dog, so
Oh, sorry. Okay. Then I'll just put it over there. Okay. So
no
whenever
worries.
you,
If
yeah,
my dog
okay.
barks, I just ignore.
Okay, there we go. So everybody, yes, I'm a pet lover.
Yes,
So
it's great.
yeah, when you're well, for me as the accompanist, maybe I've sourced out the music, but then I'm just watching her teach. But what I always did, of course, too, was I watched the effect on the students. And I think what I got to pick up on a lot that I'm not so sure this teacher actually did, is I picked up on the energy in the room. Like I'm sort of always been that energy sensor. So I could see when she had done a progression that was appropriate because the students were enthusiastic to dig in and give it a try. I could
Mm.
see when the progression was too much and there was hesitation because you could see the anxiety building of kids who go like, I'm going to fail at this. She
Mm.
was also not for good for them, but good for my learning. She was also kind of a bit acerbic, like a bit sarcastic and a bit biting often. And I could see the effect. Like if a
Mm.
snappy comment came out of her mouth, I could see she might be now moving on and looking somewhere else, but I could see that kid sort of wither.
Mm.
So I got to really watch the um, the effect on all of her choices on those
Mm.
students. And I think when we're teaching, ideally we are watching the effect on our students, and that's what we gauge everything by. But so often you're having to plan what the next thing is and respond to that. And I didn't have to respond. I had my music ready. I just got to observe over and over and over and over again. I didn't have to change who I was based on their response. You know what I mean? And so I
Yeah.
think teachers often would see, oh, I made a comment. And if I was really sensitive, I could see that that kid's self-esteem just went just a little bit because maybe I
Mm.
wasn't encouraging in a way that I had intended. Maybe my tone was a bit much or something. And
Right.
yet you often don't have the time for that. You're instead looking to the next child who you're making a comment for and all that. So I don't think we always get to really, we might see, but I don't think we always get to process the effect of our language and our tone and even the choices of what we're asking them to do. Whereas
Mhm.
I had nothing else to do but to observe. Again, once my music was chosen and when it was a syllabus class, I didn't have to make choices. So
Right.
I could just watch and feel. And
Mm.
that, so if people do say, I want to up my game as a teacher, and you're in a dance studio where, there's a faculty of 10, go say, look, I just I just want to come and be a sponge and I'm absorbing what you do. Obviously, you're not there to judge, you're just there to absorb. And have a time where sometimes you're absorbing all of the methods that the teacher's using and you're trying to figure out, I wonder why she did that. But then
Hmm.
with a different lens another time and go, I'm only looking to see the effects on the student's body. I'm only looking to see the
Mm.
effects on the student's spirit. And take it through
Yeah.
a different lens. And really, yeah, take the time to absorb that. And then of course have somebody come observe you and give feedback.
Mm. Yeah.
I
Oh,
mean,
I love that.
teachers
I love that.
ideally, yeah, ideally we're good at giving feedback. You know what? To be good at giving feedback, you have to be really good at receiving feedback.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
teachers often stop
Yes.
receiving feedback on their teaching. But I would say every single student is giving you feedback on your teaching. And that's why, actually, just recently, I taught a group of teachers working with the 3 6-year-olds. And I said, no matter what happens in all of your teaching career, always have, even one class a week that's the little ones, because they are your best teachers about your teaching methods, because they've got no filter. They
Mhm.
just, it bounces off them in a way where you get reflected back to you immediately. How are you doing as a teacher if you're
Yes.
engaged or not, right? So
So true.
I love them because, you
Yeah.
know, oh, okay, a 15-year can go, oh, it's just hormones. That must be why they're behaving that like that. A 4-year-old, it's like, no, you've offended them. You've upset them. You've
Yeah.
scared them.
You
Like,
can
whoa.
tell.
Yeah, you're like, okay, I can tell this is me. So those are my big pieces of advice is, and I got that in those
Yeah.
really formative years of my own between the ages of 15 and 18.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. And sometimes the little kids, I love teaching them because you get information you never needed to know.
Yeah,
Like
that's true.
I
Yeah.
I had someone who so cute. I mean, there's probably millions of stories out there, but someone who was like, just got paid a quarter for cleaning the toilets. I'm like, you should come clean my toilets. The stuff that they just want to tell you at the beginning of class. I always try to leave a little room for those things when
Oh,
things are first starting because it's the best.
it's the
Yeah.
best. They totally need that. And I actually think there's like, a book series waiting to happen that is just for dance teachers where we just, all compile all our crazy stuff that we've heard and
Yes.
just all have a good
Yeah.
giggle. Yeah. Because
We
that
should start working on that.
honesty and what they can, well, that actually even tells you what they consider to be relevant, which is interesting too, because you might think you just made some really important point in dance class, and to them it wasn't relevant at all. And you're
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah. That's
okay.
that's so true. You're speaking about the power of observing, really.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Like
absolutely.
sometimes we get so stuck in the doing as a dance teacher, especially in those beginning years. I think, like, I remember putting a lot of pressure on myself to create a result and, whatever it was. I was more focused on me than I was on actually seeing what was
Exactly.
happening with my students. So that's so huge.
Or if you took all that time, you're this wonderful dance teacher, you have 5 classes in a row, and you took 2 hours before your day and did all these class plans. And you thought it through how it's going to go. And darn it, you're going to do that class plan because you're going to get those results. And again, you're focused on you of just getting your stuff spewed out and not always receiving, observing it. And, the lesson plan's only a guideline. It can
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
be what it's meant to be. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's all about observing and receiving the feedback. That this We are there to give feedback. Some people would call it corrections. I don't personally like that term because it sounds like something was wrong.
Mm.
Um, we're there to give feedback. But how we give the feedback and what we're giving the feedback on, we are also always getting feedback on. It's a feedback loop. It goes both
Mm.
ways. That harkens
Yes.
back to the previous interview saying like about that authority dictator thing. It's like actually student to teacher, I think of it as either we're here or if we must be, it's just like this.
Hmm.
Just that tiny bit above you because I just say to kids sometimes, look, I've just been on the planet a few decades longer than you, so I do have some good advice. You
Yes.
probably
Yes.
want to experiment with it, listen to it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you know your body and you know your goals. And it's the same for a 4-year-old.
Yes, absolutely.
Really?
Um, that's interesting too. It reminds me a little bit of Simone Biles just coming out of the Olympics, right? And there was a story about her helping another person who wanted to quit gymnastics. And bringing them to her gym. And the thing she said at the end of it was, do you see what we do here? We pull you up. Like
Yeah, that's
instead of
lovely.
so many people, that dictatorship we talked about in the previous interview and that kind of thing. But I want to stick really close to the little kids. And
Yes.
I know I was completely overwhelmed when I first started teaching. I felt like even though I had a college education in,
Mhm.
I had pedagogy classes and I had kinesiology and I had all those fabulous things that, you hope every dance teacher gets. When I had a dance classroom of 3 and 4 year olds on my own, I
Mhm.
was like, what is this? And I was totally like, I had to rearrange my brain on what I thought dance was going to be because I wasn't used to it. And I had a little kid. So I knew what kids were like, but I did not know what it was going to be like to try and manage a classroom. So I want to
Well,
dive into a little bit about managing the classroom. And then I know you have choreography that we talked about a little bit.
mhm.
And I'd love to get, all your expertise in the area of choreography and classroom management for those little ones that we love so much.
Right. Wow. Okay. Well, number one would be to make sure you're defining management properly.
Mm.
Management isn't control. Sorry, just plugging in there. Um, the image I give for corrections and for classroom management is to imagine like rain coming down the side of a mountain and it's being like massive downpour. And you want to make sure that you're diverting the water so it doesn't, like flood the town below or something. So you could continually let the water flow and then, oh, it's going where I don't want to, build a little dam and then water flow, oh, build a little dam, build a little dam. Or you could be building the trench just enough ahead of the water so you're constantly guiding it where to go. And
Hmm.
I think what a lot of teachers do is they're being reactive instead of like proactive. So if I'm being reactive, I'm always damming them up and I'm like getting them reorganized in their line and I'm getting it and I'm always managing something after it's already happened. So a big example of that, one that every young teacher probably goes through. Oh, we're going to work on our spine. Okay, everybody, let's all be cats. They're going to all start meowing. They just are. You just told them to be cats and they're going to meow. And now you've got so much meowing that's going on and they're loving it and it's chaos. And then you got to somehow wrangle down the voices and get them
But
back
I
to the task.
never use their spine.
Yeah, and they never use their spine. That's right. So the preventative, the proactive would be going, think of that water going, if I ask them to be cats, they will meow and I'll have to
Hmm.
build the dam. Or
Hmm.
I can be ahead of it and go, what's the natural response to what I'm about to say? Is that what I want? So instead of be like, all right, everybody, let's come down onto our hands and knees. Now, have you ever seen a cat move its spine? Let's move our spines like a cat. And you might get the odd meow, but you might not. In fact, I usually don't because I framed it in time. I built the
Mm.
trench for the water to flow. I guided where I
Yes.
wanted them to go. So that's number one is you cannot contain the energy of 15 3-year-olds. You're
Right.
wrangling cats, which most people know you can't train cats very well.
Yes.
So yeah, don't even try. So if you find yourself working on classroom management, it's possible that you are always just 5, 10, 30 seconds behind the game and you're always reacting. I mean,
Hmm.
experience comes in, right? Where you go, oh, I said that and I got this result.
Right.
So next time I'll say this and I'll get this result. And you just are, that's that observing thing again. I'm just really paying attention to what did I do and say. So I don't tell students to go up to the corner. That's too open-ended for them. Like say we're going to go jump over blocks or something.
Hmm.
It would be, let's all go to the corner and make a line with our feet together. They know what to do when they get there. I didn't have
Hmm.
to pull them off the bars or do it,
Right.
and it's so
Right.
obvious when you hear it, but a lot of young teachers in particular, they don't think that extra little bit ahead. They're not
Sure.
used to thinking that way.
Yes.
So it can be as simple as the clear directives that will tell them what to do, because you could
Hmm.
spend a lifetime telling little kids what not to do. So
Right.
I hope
Absolutely.
it, rather than saying, don't hang on the bar, it's like, all right, so we're going to come up and we're going to line up right near the back of the space, and we're all going to put our fingers together, and you do it before you're near the bar. Put our fingers together, little sausages on a plate, and then we're going to put them on our waist. That's where our hands are going to be when we end up at the back of the room. If my hands are here, it may never occur to me to hang on the bar.
Right. Right. Yeah, because you already put them in a special
So
spot.
you're not managing that. It never
Yes.
happened. So it's good. It's prevention. I mean, again, that's
Yes.
observation and that's experience. And it's realizing that it's on you to dig that little trench ahead of the water
Mhm.
instead of always containing it, and not to bemoan the fact that I'm always containing it. It's like you're there to guide it and channel it.
Yes.
I think a lot of
Yes.
teachers, they wish they could almost, they don't, they would never admit it, but almost like, I wish I could just squish that energy a little bit, because it's like in the box always popping out,
Yeah.
and you're like,
Yeah.
and they're always popping out at different times. It's like, oh yeah, but that energy is amazing if
Yes.
if you can
Bottle it.
channel it. I mean, I even do things like, I just call it octopussy. If they're getting particularly wiggly because I was asking them, perhaps inappropriately, to do too much slow motion on the spot, stillness requiring balance type actions, then we'll just drop to the floor and wiggle like crazy for 30 seconds. And we're going to just have a little octopusy moment. And you just go, if they need to wiggle, and by the way, standing still is the highest degree of coordination and higher level thinking movement
Mm.
that we can do, is to not move. So
Mm.
asking
Yeah.
a kid to be
Yes.
still is the number one hardest thing. I mean, just try meditating and how hard it is to be still.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
right. So you're asking a 3-year-old to be still. Their wiggling is how they stay stimulated and alert. So
Yes.
if you ask them to be still for a little length of time, give them the wiggles on purpose. Make it part of the
Yes.
dance so they never feel wrong for doing it. And then maybe you can say, oh, we're going to do this one more time, and then we're going to octopussy. And they can sustain for that little bit more and gain
Oh,
that
yes.
control we all want them to have.
Right. Well, the reward at the end of class, right? I like to think of it as that there you get your creative time at the end of class.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to walk through this, but that's coming. And
That's
then they,
coming. And I
yes,
think also too, we tend to put the rewards at the end, but for a 45-minute class, let's say for 3-year-olds, there's so much in the now. Their brains are literally
it's true.
wired to be in the now. They don't have the linear processing until about the ages of 7 or 8, just so people
Mm,
know. Like from a brain
mm,
development perspective, they're mostly in their right brain, which is very now oriented. So telling them that it's, coming and it's a half an hour away
sure.
doesn't
Yeah.
actually mean a lot. So it's like, oh, if you can tell that they need that creative moment now, personally, I think all dancing exercises could have that creativity built right into it.
Yeah. Especially those young ones. I love that. Yeah. Like have a
All
few.
all the time.
Yeah.
It's layered in. So yes, we're going to move our spines like cats, because moving like a cat is far more interesting than just moving my spine for, I don't know why, but okay, I'm moving my
Right.
spine.
Yes.
They
Yes.
don't care to do that,
Absolutely.
and it's boring.
Yeah. They need that imagery
They
for
absolutely
sure.
do that. I
Yes.
personally think all ages benefit from imagery,
Yes.
but those
Oh,
young ones,
absolutely.
that's where their brains are at. And they will
Absolutely.
stay engaged with you if you're keeping them in story and character. They will stay
Hmm.
engaged because that's
Yes.
their land of imagination is where they're living. Don't try to pluck a little kid out of the land of imagination into the land of controlling a body that they're still getting to know.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
number one.
Yeah.
Are you actually giving them what they're going to be capable of? Not capable because, wow, you've trained them really well, but capable because that's what's appropriate for that age.
Right.
And so you
Yes.
got to
Yes.
know what's appropriate.
Yeah. Speaking of age appropriateness, we want to talk about choreography. I know that was
Mhm.
something we talked about just a smidge on, but what would be the top three things with those young ones that we should focus on when it comes to choreography?
Well, my thing is I look at the three things that we're always, almost like the three balls we're always juggling as teachers and that we're always asking them to juggle. Body, like what's my body doing? Space, where in space am I? Where am I going? Whether it's a circle or a line or whatever. And the music. So we're always juggling body, space, and music. And again, separating them, I don't think is a great idea,
Mm.
because then bringing them back together is hard. In fact, they always are always together. So let's keep it that way. So I think the biggest mistakes that I see, and therefore now that would be like the damming the river up instead of digging the trench, would be that teachers they focus on the body. They focus on, oh, we're putting them on recital, stage there, and we've got to show all the little steps that we know. And so we're just going to do our little plies and our little spins and our little toe taps in some little order, and boom, there you go. And they're not paying attention to the importance of space and music.
Mm.
So if the space is interesting, meaning I'm doing X, Y, and Z here, and then I change to a circle and I do something here, and then I go up to the corner and do something there. I always think of my choreography almost like an obstacle course that they have to move through, so that it's got a spatial story. So if there's ever a repeat, well, it doesn't feel the same because now you're in a circle when you did it. And before you were in a line, and then so the mistake that teachers
Yeah.
make, I see all the time, is they make it too complex for the body and very boring for the space and the music. And
Mm.
then they think, oh, that's because they're three that they don't remember the choreography. And I go, no, it's because you're repeating the same boring steps that have no connection to story or music or space, and
Yes.
expecting them to
Yeah.
remember it when there's no container to remember it by. So if I'm going to do a really basic little classical music song that just keeps repeating, and I stay in line all the time because I wanted to make it easy. No, I picked easy music because it repeats, and I picked standing in a line pretty much the whole time. And we're just repeating. That's not easy. That's confusing because you're like, well, I don't know what was the first time, second time, third time. But if you
Right.
pick music that's got some real meat to it, some storytelling in it, a verse versus a chorus, things that sound distinctly different, that they can always find their way, like the breadcrumbs in Hansel and Gretel or something, they can always find their way through the music because there's distinct enough sections that tell the story as we move through
Mm.
space. And then my
Mm.
body isn't doing steps. My body is telling the story. So I
Right.
don't have a whole bunch of steps to remember.
Yeah.
I'm just telling a
Yeah.
story.
I love it.
That's the number one thing is boring music, repetitive choreography, simplifying it by not doing spatial changes because you think that they can't handle it because they keep showing you that they forget the choreography, instead of realizing it's because you're giving them steps, not story.
Yeah. I love that. That's great. How much more interesting for them?
Yes, and for the audience,
Yes.
oh my gosh,
Yeah.
everybody loves
Yeah.
it. So I have students, I think, like, okay, well, here's my thing. In the last, ooh, gosh, 25 years or so, I have
Mhm.
3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, they dance on stage without me, without a helper, because they
Awesome.
know their dance.
Yeah. Yeah.
It might look cute, and honestly, it's usually accepted because it's almost expected that the 3-year-olds are going to stand there and do a little bend and stretch and a little twirl and a little few points, and there's the big kid standing there doing it beside them. But I think the other mistake really is that we underestimate what they're capable of.
Yeah.
They are
Yeah.
capable of so much more if you give it in the terms that they are living their life in, which is story and imagination.
Yes. Yes. That's so true. It reminds me, I remember doing this dance and I wanted to do it so bad because it was a little monkey costume with bananas and we had a tree in the background. And so I'm like, oh, there's like barely any dance in this. Like moving to one location and then someone would pass out the bananas and then they would move to the another location,
Yeah.
and I was like, well, I like it, so we're just going to keep it. But I felt like, should I have done that? But it worked
No,
out
that's
well and no
brilliant.
one complained for sure.
No, that's brilliant.
So
And they love it. And I think what the parents want to see that will have you, want to re-enroll your kid the next time is that the kid loved it. And like a 3 or 4-year-old doesn't necessarily talk about their confidence level, right? But that they
sure.
loved it and that they want to do it again. That's really what it comes down. Did you have fun on stage? Would you want to do it again? Okay, let's do it again. Which means
Yeah.
let's put you in dance another year. And the only way to do that is if they felt like they got to share something. And just you'd mentioned,
Mm.
like at the beginning of class, give them a time to share stories. again, we share stories. That's what our lives are built on. And
Yes,
when I work
absolutely.
even with older kids and, they're being a bit serious and not wanting to express or whatever, I go, apart from maybe, athletes and maybe the tech people, who are the most highly paid people on the planet? And they all have a, and finally we
Uh,
come around to like movie stars,
uh-huh.
people who
Actors.
make believe and use their imagination all day, every day. So
Yes.
please don't think that you're too grown up to tell stories and pretend.
Right.
So if we know that, so when you're working with those 3, 4, 5, 6 year olds, I personally think almost every age, then why are we why are we trying to grow up and away from stories when the
Mm.
reality
Yeah.
is the highest paid people on the planet are the ones who tell stories,
Yes. Yes. And
right?
sing songs, right?
And sing songs.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all here because we just want to connect on human experience or, connecting with the animals or
Yes.
nature or something.
Yeah.
It's us
Yeah.
just really being in our world, not just in our body going, look, I can bend and stretch and twirl. And I'm
Yes.
4 and I'm supposed to remember which way to twirl. Well, that's not going to happen. So your
Yeah.
dances, when you make them simple that way, they're likely to look messy
Mm.
because which foot am I going to point first? Which way am I going to twirl first? You're never going to get them all doing the same thing. But
And
if
not
it's
at the
go
same
to the
time.
monkey tree to get your bananas, and this time we're going to march when we get there, but once we get a banana, we're going to skip. Boom, they're going to remember that. They're going to do that, and it won't
Yes.
actually
Yeah.
matter if
So
you're
true.
marching anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those
Yeah.
are the
Absolutely.
top 3 things: is body, space, music. Bring them together and realize that the complexity that would come with telling a story actually makes it accessible for their little memories, and they'll be just fine. They will impress you actually with what they're capable of.
Yes. That's
So
awesome. I
their
love that.
creativity gotta be there,
Yeah.
and it's fun. It's fun. Don't take it
Exactly.
seriously.
So fun. Exactly. Yes.
I had students who were 3. I was really obsessed for a little while about, like from the brain dance world that I teach a lot of the upper lower body pattern of connecting upper to lower, where you do a weight shift onto your hands. And I was like, I need it. Those students need it. So we did a little
Mm.
frog dance, and we had little mats we cut out, like little lily pads. And you should have seen the floor patterns we got to do. They're 3 and they're weaving through and around and coming back to their mat. It was brilliant, if I, say so myself, because
Love
they
it.
had a very visual thing that allowed them to do some really complex, interesting floor patterns and
Hmm.
remember it.
Yes.
And then just go from A to B with this step, go from B to C with this step. And we got to show a lot, all because we had lily pads, because I also wanted to work on the frog pattern in the body. They didn't need to know
Yes.
that. They thought it was cute
I
that they were
agree.
frogs,
Right. Yeah.
as did the
I
little
love
parents.
that. I love
Yeah.
that. It makes me think of the fact that, like, I have so many props that I've used for, teaching experiences with the young ones in the classroom. But when you're talking about story, like even through adults, right? That's the highest paid position or one of them.
Yeah.
The older kids probably would really still benefit. Like, I should pull those props out more often because it's going to get that connection in there, right?
It
And it's going to
will.
get them thinking outside the box, and they're going to be engaged more, and they're going to have more fun.
They'll have more fun. And it's like, okay, remember in the previous year I said, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds kind of have the 1 foot in childhood and 1 foot in adulthood, and they just are back and forth. And you can say to them, you'll be filling their inner child that's still alive and well by playing with a prop. What I say to students when I play with a prop and they're a little older and you can tell they're like, oh, is I go, I'm willing to do anything and everything for you to remember this. So we're all going to have a little silly experience right now, and we're all going to remember it. Boom. And then I bring out the fun prop. They all play with the prop. They giggle. It embeds, and play is how we learn always,
Yes.
our entire lives.
Yes. In fact,
I wish I
Elon
could remember
Musk said that.
there was some quote I heard just the other day. I think it was Einstein that said, wisdom is intelligence that started to play, or something like that. I got to
Oh,
find it. It
neat.
was really
I'll
cool.
have to look that one up. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Elon Musk
Something
made
like
that
that,
quote.
that intelligence at play is creativity. Anyway, you get the drift. Is that
Yeah, yeah.
even a scientist like Einstein is going, we need to play.
Yeah,
We need to play,
yeah.
because play means we're experimenting, which means we are inherently paying attention to our intention of what we're going to do and the result. So you become
Hmm.
self-observing. When you're self-observing, you're teaching yourself.
Hmm.
Therefore, it's not
Absolutely.
you teaching,
Absolutely.
it's pouring into you. So I think, yeah, those are principles that to me are just foundational and key. And we forget them when we get into just training a body.
Right. Yes. I love that. Well, I love everything that you have brought to these interviews. Like it's kind of like my heart's cry and you've put it into words so beautifully. And I just appreciate you for that and everything that you've brought to these interviews. Is there anything that you would like to say before you go and we end our time?
Anything I'd like to say? Well, you heard about the free gift in the previous workshop, so or previous interview, so
Sure.
please check that out. My biggest thing would be if you're doing this as a career, as much as you're there for your students, be there for yourself. Keep your fire stoked up, which might mean that you're playing and you're not taking it so seriously. Might mean that you're working on not just pouring in, but drawing out. And also just remain curious. Some of the best work I've ever done is becoming curious in the Laban world. So I'll just kind of drop that seed because then you can investigate on your own. But the Laban world and looking at movement through that lens and the developmental movement patterns and the reflexes, like there's an imagery, actual anatomically based functional imagery. Like there's so much to remain curious about. That's what
Mhm.
keeps your fuel going. And when the students can see that you go, oh, I have a new image for you. I was reading this thing yesterday. You know, they fuel off of that, and they are
Yes.
also seeing that you're still learning. You don't have to have the facade of being perfect if they know that you're still learning
Yeah.
and that you will
Yep.
go find a solution and you're curious. So if you want them to be good learners that are curious, model that and be that and share that with them. That, you know, an hour spent reading, I'm reading Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen's book of neurocellular development right now. And that's what I do for
Sounds fun.
fun because it's deep and it's so relevant and it just it fuels me. And so dance can be such a draining profession, but it really doesn't have to be. So
Right.
the time it
Yes.
takes to learn something new, and which really, if you are people listening to these interviews, clearly you're willing to spend some time on your own education. So yay. And just go, there's
Right.
many things, whether it's the YouTube
Yes.
videos or some books, just keep learning and then let it gestate in you. And then be sure to share these things with your students in new and unique ways so that you're always playing with how you're even teaching. And
Yes.
it's
I
still
love it.
fresh and new. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
We
then
should
the
all be
students,
lifelong learners.
well,
Yes.
lifelong. I call myself a learnaholic. I don't know if that sounds good or bad, but
No,
that's
it's
it.
good. I
I
think
can't
it's
help
great.
myself. I gotta drink it in every day because
Yes.
that's what to me a good day living is. I learned something really
Yeah.
cool today.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. Well, thank you again, Mariah-Jane Thies. And you can find her at theradiantdanceteacher.com, right? I want to make sure I got that right.
Yes and no. I
No.
don't have two websites, so I sort of have the Radiant Dancer working with
Okay.
dancers, and I have the Radiant Dance Teacher. The
Okay.
website is actually theradiantdancer.com, but I do have a YouTube channel, The Radiant Dance Teacher, and I have a private Facebook group that you can request to join, The Radiant Dance Teacher. But the actual website is Radiant Dancer.
Awesome. Well, I
Hopefully keep
highly
your research.
recommend everybody goes and subscribes to
Yeah,
her on YouTube
yeah,
and looks her up. And I look forward to seeing you again, hopefully someday soon. God
yeah.
bless
I'd
you.
like.
And
Thank you
thank
so
you to
much.
all of you
Okay,
who've been
bye.
watching. Bye bye. Have a great